Okay, so today I'm in Star Sports' Mayfair office again, Curzon Street, with Shane Reville. Thanks very much for flying over from Ireland, especially Shane.
Thanks for the invite, Simon.
You're very welcome. So, you're a professional punter,
Yeah.
and how long have you been one?
Well, I'd be operating on my own last 17 years. Half of that would have been as a salaried consultant as well as punting, and the last 8 to 9 years been on my own.
Okay, now I became aware of you. You did a thing with Gerard, aka Icy.
That's correct,
on
yeah.
Twitter. Obviously, I don't know everybody anyway, especially in Ireland. But have you been sort of keeping your head down below the?
Well, I wouldn't have a social media presence or anything like that. I'd operate within a close circle of friends, and I'd have a few relationships with other professionals and that I would speak to. But no, I wouldn't be online giving my opinion on every race or putting up screenshots of dockets or stuff. That wouldn't be my style at all. So that's why in Ireland people would have known me by name. They probably would have walked by me on the street, and I wouldn't imagine anyone in the UK knew me at all, to be honest.
So how come you've suddenly decided to?
Well, Gerard was annoying me to do the Twitter spaces, and I said to him one evening, I texted him and said, sure, look, I was after listening to a couple of his previous ones and I enjoyed listening to the lads. So I said, sure, it can't do any harm. And that was basically it. We went on it, done it for an hour, and he said it was well received. So I was happy enough. Once he was happy, I was happy.
Did you get much feedback from it, from people?
Yeah, a few people got in touch and said they enjoyed it. So that was basically it. Nothing massive or outrageous or anything, but people seem to receive it well.
Okay, now I've listened to that, and I've tried not to sort of cover the same ground. But obviously, we want to find out about you and about what you do and how you make your pay and stuff. I listened with interest. It said that you worked in a betting shop for 6 years before getting a job in the Paddy Power trading room.
I had done three years previously in a betting shop of my uncle's in Newbridge, where I'm from, and I was on a training course, a fast training course for through the FAI. It was a back to work scheme, and just at that stage saw the Paddy Power position available. It was advertised, and I went for that, and I got that. I started working in the Paddy Power shop in Naas when I was 22.
And were you chopping it off punting then?
No, I would have been someone who had a keen interest in racing, and it always lent towards the Irish racing. I suppose the Curragh racecourse, Naas racecourse, they're only a stone's throw away from me, from where I was brought up. So I just always had more of an inclination to lean towards the Irish racing when I was having a bet.
Okay, so were you sort of going the extra yard with the form book then?
No, I would never even. My interest grew when I was working in the shops in Powers. You're more exposed to it, and of course then as well, you were seeing some clever money from the right people at different stages, which gave me more interest to follow them, see how they were going, and yeah, it went from there. But the English racing, apart from the better jumps racing in England, that I was never really attracted to it.
Okay, so was it just literally the location of where you lived, being next to those great race courses, that got your interest, or was there any sort of family background?
Well, we used to a couple of my uncles, the uncle that I mentioned ended up running betting shops himself, a couple of my uncles, and my father, the older guy, late teens, early 20s, he went racing quite a good bit. So we used to travel around, go to a few pints, go racing at the weekends. He enjoyed that, so I used to go along with him and my brother. And of course, some of the tracks were so handy as well that you could walk to them, you know. And that was basically it. And we had the dog track out in Newbridge. Used to go all the time. Actually, it was a mutual friend of ours, Des White, who who he used to stand out at Newbridge Dog Track, and on the busy nights, charity nights when the Cox Cup was on, I'd do runner for him. And he was a hard man to work for back then, so he was. It was always my fault when the favourite won.
Des knows everyone.
And funny enough, his brother Colin, who's a very prominent layer now in the ring, he was clerking. So between the three of us, we're still going, involved in the industry. I wouldn't have had much money on that at the time now.
Now, so you went from being working in the betting shop to getting on the trading floor with Paddy Power. It's quite a jump.
Yeah, well, I was taken by surprise, to be honest. Paddy Power always used to seem to bring in graduates from college that had their business degrees, etc. They may not have had any sort of background in racing. And they came to approach me one day. Jimmy Mangan came out and saw me and asked me did I want to give it a go. They were obviously trying to promote from within the company. They'd made a decision. So I said I'd give it a go, but once that, if it didn't work out in 6 months, that I could go back to the shop, and that was fine. So I went in and I stayed there then.
So what were you given to do when you got there?
I remember when I got there first, and I had to try and price a maiden hurdle in Navan. I'll never forget it. And it was 30 runners, and I think I come up at about 240%. I didn't want to lay anything, apparently. So, but that always stuck in my mind. A very slow process, a grind. So it was to try and get to grips with it. But slowly but surely, got there, and you get more confident. And it's like everything else, you know. The more practice you put in, the luckier you get.
You say luckier, and you say it was a slow grind, but you went from being in the betting shop, working your way through the Paddy Power trading room, to leaving to be a professional punter in 4 years.
That's right, yeah. They allowed me to oversee the Irish racing side of it. I'd say after about, it would have taken me a year to feel confident enough, maybe for my boss to feel confident enough to leave me at it, doing the racing. And then it just went from there. I was just pricing all the races myself. And it was only around that time that back then, you were only pricing the handicaps and the better races. It was only in my time in Powers that we started doing all the maidens. You know, you'd be quick to forget how much has changed in the last 15, 20 years, you know. And but sure, it was only ourselves pricing them, and Ladbrokes really. Ladbrokes had a good presence on the ground in Ireland at the time. And but I was pricing every meeting. It was just practice, and I just took to it, and was having a few, but wasn't a huge punter by any stretch. And of course, most of the firms that were pricing races, they were probably just more or less, you know, copying and pasting what Powers were putting up. So it was hard. It was harder. You'd have a bet at your own price, you know.
Was it just something you had a natural aptitude for? Or did somebody sit you down and say, right, this is how you do it?
No, I would have always had a very good relationship with figures, maths in school, the usual, percentages, all that. That came easy to me once I could understand how to break the races down. Do you know what I mean? The mathematical side of it was never an issue, so that was always my advantage. But I always remember it as being slow learning. Was how I remember it.
Right, you said, do I know what you mean? And I don't. So how do you break a race down?
Well, everyone will be different, and people maybe watching this won't agree with what, but if you just take a typical 14-runner handicap in Dundalk, just as a standard example, so I'd be looking at pricing that 121, 1.5% a runner. I know the firms take a lot more to start with overnight, but that gives me a head start on them. So I'll put them all through the criteria that I'm looking for, flat race. I won't go looking for a favourite. I'll let the favourite come to me. I'll start with number 1. I'll break them down 1 to 14. Then I'll assess how the race is going to be run and how each horse's running style fits into the way the race is going to be run. They probably come together. Of course, you'll have your draw, etc. So I will price it, and then there's 3 scenarios then. You either have not enough margin, you have too much, or you're bang on. So with each one, I have to tinker around with the prices then. And finally, and the most important, I'll go down through the prices, and you just ask 2 questions for each horse. The first one is, if the number 1 is 3-1, and I would say, would I back him at 3-1? And the answer has to be no. And then I would say, would you lay it at 3-1 if you had to? And the answer has to be yes. And for me then, that's my price. But you're getting your margin in at about 1.5% a runner, and then ask those 2 questions, and then I'm happy, I'll file it and move on.
Okay, so going back to when you were at Paddy Power, you've decided to leave a secure, well, I assume a reasonably well-paid job to become a professional punter. What decided you to do that? Did you see other people making money?
No, there was a sea of change at the time. The old At the Races were starting to show all the Irish meetings live, and it became pretty obvious very quickly that all the UK and offshore firms wanted a piece of the action, but they were going to need people on their side. And I knew Ian Marmion from Powers, and he approached me because I would have been betting with them. So he had an idea of my business, and he just asked me would I be interested. And it was an opportunity that I didn't want to turn down. Like when I took the chance to go into the trading room in the first place, because if they had never given me that chance, I'd still be working in the shops today now.
Do you think you would have been able to accrue the skills to beat the bookies if you'd stayed in there? Would you have had that
No,
ambition?
I wouldn't. You wouldn't have the time to do it for a start. I would have always had a keen interest and would have always been a punter. So I would, but I would never have went down that road with it. But when I was in the trading room, we had a man from Scotland, Alec Farquhar. He'd be very well known, and he had a consultant's role with us. And eventually, they let me talk to him. So they did, and like, only for me being exposed to his workings and how he'd done things, I don't think I would have even. I would put it down to him that I am where I am now.
And is there anything that he did that you can share?
He just his work, the way he went about it, and a lot of it, I had to put my own twist on what he was showing me. You could never replicate it. But it was just his approach to pricing a race and how he done it, and his reasons for opposing horses. They all stuck with me, and me putting my own twist on it. It was a massive help. I wouldn't have got where I am without him.